Hello, 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 beady friends, and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem, and I'm here today with the Magical Mystery Bead Box for February 2024, La Dolce Vita, the Sweet Life. Now, we unboxed this yesterday with the gorgeous Sarah, Deb, and Trisha over on a fantastic monthly makers meeting. So if you missed out on that video, check back on the timeline here at Jessie James Beads on Facebook, and you'll be able to see in videos Sarah unboxes the whole thing for you, which is wonderful. Always a treat to spend time with such lovely creative ladies. And then we had lots of fun making a project. So I'm back with you today, and today I'm going to be working with Mediterranean lemonade. So if you have the Magical Mystery Bead Box for February, congratulations. If you watch along either yesterday with the creative grouping or today with myself and you see something that you just can't live without, then I've popped some links in the video description for you to check out. Not only there are a handful of February boxes still available, but there are also options of how you could subscribe to receive one of these boxes every month, for instance. There's options. Go check them out, have a look and see what you think. So as I mentioned, we are working with February 2024, La Dolce Vita. I'm going to pop you down to have a look at the bead mix, just while I welcome our first few members here today. So let's switch over to the other camera. This is the mix we're going to work with. I've got Hazel, Sissy and Anne already joining me. Welcome, my lovelies. I hope that you are well. Hazel says, hi, Jem. Sissy sends all of the kisses in the known universe. And Anne says hi from California. Where are you watching from, Hazel? Sissy, I know, is in Cheshire, in England, which, if it's anything like it is here today, these are not the colours we have seen today. All we have seen is grey, damp sky. The river is about to burst its banks and the canal is teetering within an inch of the top. So, yeah, it's a bit damp round here. Love the necklace you're wearing, says Anne. Thank you very much. Keep watching on the YouTube channel. You'll find out how to make that in a couple of weeks. That's also from La Dolce Vita box, February 2024. The Magical Mystery Bead Box from Jessie James. Maria is in from Florida. Welcome to you. Whereabouts are you in Florida? Hazel's in Massachusetts. So how are you all keeping today? Is it as wet where you are as it is here in Blighty? You are welcome, says Anne. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Arigato. Domo arigato. So the Magical Mystery Bead Box for February has the beautiful imagery of the Med. We've got lemons, we have tomatoes, we have got some beautiful wine, we've got basil I should say, I'm sorry, and we've also got images of Santorini, which features heavily in one of the pieces that I made yesterday. Let me just grab that little bar necklace in. If you wanted to see how to make that, check back on the video link. You'll also see the fantastic Deb and Trisha working up a storm with this bead box on yesterday's Creative Makes video, along with our gorgeous Sarah. So there's lots of movement in a piece like that. That was from one of the other bead mixes. Gitana is in from Rhode Island. Welcome to you, my darling. It's lovely to have your company. Venice, where it's sunny. I'm sure it is. Florida's a wonderful, wonderful, warm place. One of my gorgeous, dear friends used to live in New Jersey. Diana has just moved down to retire in Florida. So the tasting menu. What is a tasting menu? Well, it's a fun way to describe all of the bits and pieces that you get in a bead box like this. Sarah's only just unboxed this, so I'm not going to go through every single piece with you again. If you want to watch the full unboxing, check out yesterday's video. You can see, join us on February the 21st, that's yesterday, for a live create-a-thon featuring the bold flavours of the February 2024 Dolce Vita bead box, only on the Jessie James Facebook page. So there are a number of strands and bead mixes, and today we'll be working with the Mediterranean Lemonade mini bead mix. Yesterday I worked with Santorini, and the piece that I'm wearing at the neck on the vine Barcelona, and I pinched some little charms from one of the other bead mixes as well. It might have been the Amalfi Gardens. I can't actually remember because I've slept since then. Not very much, admittedly, but I love the imagery on a piece like this. Where it's grey and miserable in the UK today, this makes me think that perhaps there is hope for sunshine and summer in the near future. So let's pop the card out of the way. Just as an FYI, whenever I make a piece of jewellery from the Magical Mystery bead box, I keep it in a box with these postcards. I adore the time and effort that goes into not just the curation, the flavours of the boxes, but also the beautiful cards that come along with. So let's pop that out of the way and let's take a closer look just at the bead mix I'm going to be working with. So this comes in a fun little reusable pot, not least of all because that's a really good size for helping you make round forms. So keep a hold of your bead pots, certainly reuse them for seed beads or keep them on your desk for bits and bobs. Mediterranean lemonade there. Let's pop that one out of the way for now. So it's a gorgeous, gorgeous collection of vibrant yellows and sunshine blues. We've got not one but two absolutely heavenly, divine citrus charms. I think these are absolutely adorable, so we're going to be working with both of those today. You can also find larger ovals, faceted rounds. We've got, I imagine they're ceramic. These are fantastic. The blue, and it's almost an earthy tone, almost like a volcanic island on the top there. We also have these fantastic little slice of lemon charms. They're gorgeous. So I worked with pretty much everything from this mix to make up this design. Now it's sitting on a bracelet holder at the moment just because I really like them, and I also use them to help me design. So let's just pop the piece down on a plain background. I've used every single one of those 4 slice of lemon charms, as well as the 2 larger, I believe it's enamel, but I could be wrong. So I'm going to show you the techniques for creating a charm extender. This sits on the extender chain, so that means that this bracelet isn't just fit for one person's size. It's got about an inch of chain on the back there, and I've got some chain ready to use today. Gaetana says, so nice to catch you live, love anything lemon. Absolutely wonderful. It's so refreshing and vibrant. I would love to take you through every single bead in the entire box, but I'll just show you quickly some of the pieces that I've used. So you've got round AB coated faceted blues. You've got disc step faceted. That's an AB coating as well. You've got spacer beads. I've added in a couple of little crimps and crimp covers at the end. I used a black beading wire because I find it useful for helping me see things on the board. You've got these large, almost lemon-shaped, funnily enough, faceted opaque beads. Some more of those little blues. You've got some gorgeous, almost Madeira colour yellow rondelles. I forgot the word for a moment there. And then you have got these lovely, lovely lemon charms. Now what I'd like to show you, if I possibly can, is that you have not just the rhinestone effect inside the lemon, but you've also got a perfectly sparkly little leaf as well. Thank you very much. Maria says it's a nice creation. I appreciate that, my lovely. So I've just added in a clasp from my stash. That's just standard parrot or lobster claw. I don't know how you would know them locally. A very small section of extender chain. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to create a charm. So one of them is going to be using one of these spot faceted beads. So they're a matte effect with high points that are shaved flat. They're really beautiful up at close and in person. And I also want to show you the back of those charms because they take real care and attention to make them lovely. So why don't we just drape this casually up near the top of the screen where it's less likely, but not entirely impossible, that I will swoop it away with my pliers. Probably going to sweep it away with my pliers, just saying. That's kind of a me thing to do. So I've made a bracelet to fit me. So one of the reasons I use a little bracelet holder like this is it means that I can prepare myself a length of beading thread. This is far longer than I need, but it just helps me to thread things. And on one end, I've just crimped over the end and added a length of chain. Now you can, if you want to, use wire guardians on either end, or you could, as I did in my initial bracelet, put double crimps on just for, we call it belt and braces here in the UK, so for double security. It's quite a lightweight piece, so it shouldn't be a huge drama anyway. So these are fantastic because it enables you to just pop your beads in and decide what kind of order you want them to sit in. So I'm just going to play with those beads. So how about you guys tell me what you've been up to today, and if there's anything that you're planning for the coming weekend, just while I lay some of these beads out, because I really don't want to make the same exact bracelet twice, so I just use these to give me an idea of how I'm going to set everything together. What I will say is I tend to pop smaller beads either side. I'm going to use this 6 o'clock position on my board, and I'll use smaller beads either side just to ensure that when I add my charm to a wrapped loop up at the top, there's enough space for that to sit really neatly. So in the original piece up here, I had some of those daisy spacers in that gorgeous glossy gold, and then I used some of that sort of Madeira, almost Madeira colour of the opaque faceted rondelles. I think I'm going to use the teeny tiny blue ones this time, but you can play around with your bead order to your heart's content. I quite like breaking up those lemony yellows with the blues. You can obviously work on whatever colour theory you like. That's something that we're probably going to touch on a little bit at Beads and Blooms this year. I'm going to think about how using colour affects us, affects our moods, all of the different ways that you can just play around with. Even ordering differently can give you something fun and something different. So let's pop one of those little blue ones at the end there. Then I think I'll add another charm on. Let's pop one of those little charms on this side as well. And then we'll work out a little bit more of the fine details. I wanted to kind of build this with you today. Sometimes it's very nice to get everything prepared, and sometimes it's just a bit more fun to completely enjoy that process with you. So I think possibly I'm going to graduate really quite rapidly from that centre point. I will do, and I've got a couple left. This weekend I'll be demonstrating beading at a local gem and jewellery show. Well done you, Anne, that sounds amazing. Is there anything in particular that you're looking at working with? Let's have a look. Pop my little blue beads. It does look like... Now, it is in the Med, but I don't know what country it is associated with. There is a form of volcano, and it forms a little bit like a C shape. And you've got this very high ridge of the former volcano, but the side has come away and fallen down into the ocean, and the photographs that I've seen are mesmerising. You have this gorgeous beach just inside the mouth of this former volcano. Don't know what it's called. Definitely a bucket list kind of place that I want to go to. So I think what I'm going to do is play with size just here. So either side of those large blue, I'm going to call them, they're not ceramic I don't think, but they kind of have a ceramic feel to them. And I'm going to graduate in both directions, up from the smallest to a medium to the largest, medium and small, and then back in the opposite direction either side. I think it's quite fun how far you can go with these things. So let's throw some spaces in as well, shall we? How about we just ooch that along ever so slightly and pop a little spacer. Let's put 2 in there, so there's a spacer either side of those charms. And you can laugh at me in a moment when I try to thread all these onto a piece of beading thread. So what else is everybody up to at the weekend? Are you going to be spending time with the family? What's going on in your lives at the moment? Whilst I just build this bracelet order, let's scooch that large one along and add another one of those. I'm saying Madeira, it's not quite a Madeira colour, but it's the first thing that came into my mind, so that's what I'm going to call it, frankly. Let's put those little lemon slices on either side of those teeny tiny blue beads, and then another teeny tiny blue bead on the far side. And then let's just randomly throw one on the other side of that big oval, one on the other side of that big oval. I quite like how that's looking. And then I think a couple of those up at the top And then maybe a couple more of those little blue ones. I'll figure that out when I get there. That's left me some spares, and I'm going to reserve 2 of the larger beads. It could be any 2 of your choice, and they're going to help me make the charm drop for the centre of the bracelet and the charm drop for the extender. Now, you don't have to have a charm drop in this one if you like your extender charms a little bit smaller. You could even use one of these instead if you prefer. So I've got some bits and pieces left over. Let's just add that into the centre for a second. Still got a couple of beads left to play with. I'll put those over to one side for now. I think those blue are glass. The ends seem to have amorini. I actually have no idea what that means. Vanessa says, I always love yellow and blue together. So pretty. Do you know what I really like about yellow and blue together? Wolverine. Looking forward to a film that's coming out in July of this year. To say that I'm a bit of a fan of Marvel movies, especially Deadpool and Wolverine. Yes, it's true. Good evening all, says Maxine, or afternoon or morning, indeed, whatever it is, wherever you are. So I'm not going to thread my beads on just yet, but I have prepared some beading thread. I've sealed off one end. I haven't put the crimp cover on just yet. I'm going to show you how poorly I managed to do that. Now, there are a couple of techniques for adding a crimp cover over the top. I'm sure you are all more proficient than I am. I just use my chain nose pliers, but you can actually use the crimping pliers to close that up if it's easier for you. Gaetana says it's laundry day, boring day, always too much laundry. We'll spend next week with my 3 grandchildren who will be on vacay. Absolutely fabulous. What fun that will be. So I'm just going to scooch this up to the corner where she laughingly says she won't hit it, but I think we all know that she probably will. And we're going to use one of these lovely luscious lemon charms and one of these flat surfaced, it's almost like a square bead that started as a round bead. Does that make sense? It probably doesn't. Wait until you see them. They are lovely. So I have around about 4 inches of 18 gauge round wire. You did know that eventually I would get to the wire, right? It is kind of my meta. And I'm going to give that a beautiful warm through. I really need fluidity in this wire for this design to be lovely and smooth. So we're going to start just warming that through, and then about 1.25 inches from one end, we'll pop a right angle on. Now I'm going to use my favourite little pliers. These are memory wire pliers. If you don't have these, you can use your bail makers or your standard round nose. But I love these little chaps, can't get enough of them. Going to just turn the smaller of those 2 pins around until I get the first half of a circle, and then the second side. Before I add my charm into position, I'm going to add a little strength to that circular form, but I'm not pressing down where the wires cross over. Give it a squish, and then we're going to pop that little lemon charm into the loop. So if we push that down so that it sits at the end of that loop shape, that's the visible surface that we're going to work with. And then if I just show you how easy it is to work with wire that you've warmed, I've just closed that up by hand. There was no need for any stress or aggravation. So I'm going to support across that round form now. And I'm not putting too much pressure on the loop on the charm, nor on where the wires cross over. But I just want to draw that wire around the core. The core is the wire coming up here. And we're going to tidy that around at least 2 wraps. Now, if you just simply want to use all of that wire up, you can, or you can trim it away when you've got your 2 wraps. And I'm going to do exactly that. So the reason I'm putting my finger here is to stop the wire kicking up and hurting my camera, which happened once, and once is enough. And then I'm going to take a second to squish the tail of wire down against the core, making it nice and flat and safe. So we've created ourselves a wrapped loop. Give that a quick smooth through. And then we're going to add in our bead. And in this case, it is the cube that's not a cube that once was round. That's the bead I've chosen to use. In the demonstration piece, I had one of those huge, beautiful, vibrant, faceted yellow beads. So whatever you fancy, really. So that's the first part that we've worked up together. Now, because I want this to be visible in this orientation, you can see the loop on the charm is flat to the table. which means that the wrapped loop I've just created is at 90 degrees. It's opposing the table. So what I'm going to do is lay my pliers flat across that wire and push the tail up. So that is in the same orientation as the loop that we've just created, in opposition to the table, like so. So let's make another loop. Now, when I make this next loop, it can be really as small as your beading wire is. If you make it a very large loop, it can move around very, very easily on larger threading materials. However, today, because I'm working with a fine threading material, I want the smallest loop possible. So again, you can use your round nose pliers, or you could use your memory wire pliers. So I'm going to support across that circular form, draw the tail of wire all the way around the core. What I'm looking to do is to fill most of the way to the bead. I probably should have used a yellow bead. You might have been able to see it better on the table. But if I just wobble that around a bit, you'll be able to see that it is indeed there. It is not a ghost bead. It exists. So I'm going to pinch that really firmly and tidily wrap around the core wire until I have filled that gap, but don't put any pressure on your lovely bead. We want to keep that nice and safe and sound. So we're making sure that our two loops are in the same orientation. Sometimes when you're wrapping, that can twist slightly. If you're just very gentle, you can push that back so that it sits neatly, exactly how you want it to. Now I'm going to support across the top of my bead with my thumbnail and just press that wire down so that it sits really neatly, coming out at a jaunty angle on one side. Let's just push that down onto the board for a second. So again, the bead itself is sat on that core. I've got two loops that are in opposition. They're upright from the board, but the lemon charm is flat to the board. If I just rotate this around now, we really do benefit from having toasty warm wire here. So I'm just going to give that a quick run through thumb and forefinger. And then what we're going to do is drop the whole assembly. We're going to draw that wire. You can bring it from the front, where it is now. That heavier gauge wire is coming off the front of my core. You can take it to the front or you can take it to the back of the bead. I'm going to do it to the back because I like that diagonal swoosh. And all I'm going to do is just lift that charm out of the way whilst I bring the wire around the outside of the bead. If I put my finger underneath, you can see that bead better. So we've created a little elegant swoosh around the side of the bead. Hold that in position whilst we bring that tail of wire over the top. And we're just going to lock that in really quickly. Just push that down so that, again, you can see the loops are still in opposition to the desk, which means that your lemon hangs where you want it to. And we're going to take that all the way around that double wrapped core again. Now it's kind of fiddly, but it is so worthwhile getting that second wrap into position. And then we're just going to add a little coil on the bottom. Now if you prefer a clean line, you can just bring that wire to the rear of the core and just trim it away neatly, which I'll show you on the other design in a moment. We'll do a much cleaner section for the dangle charm, but for this one I quite like the idea of a coil. So you've got about 3/4 of an inch remaining on that wire. We're going to start by rotating those pliers around to get a round form going. I'll show you that upright, and then I'm going to push that into my non-dominant hand to create a small spiral, protecting the bead with my thumbnail so that I don't accidentally scratch that bead. And then once I've created the coil, I can just push that down over the front of that dangly section. So at the moment, if I just turn that sideways softly, you can see the coil sitting forward at a little bit of a funny angle. So what we're going to do is to just pull that down over the front of the design, just like so. Sometimes it's actually easier to do it by hand. So I'm just going to push that down and then ensure that everything is in the correct orientation, like so. So you've got a little coil just sitting at the base of that design. I'm going to bring it up. Now the focal length for my camera is just here where I do most of my work, so it's clearest at this point. However, I just want to bring that up a little bit where it will be blurry, but you'll be able to see that it now looks like the lemon is hanging, suspended magically beneath the bead and behind that little coil. So I'll take a photograph at the end of the show and I'll pop it in the comments, and it will also be loaded up onto the blog and YouTube at some point. You might need to just play around with that to get it to sit exactly how you want, but you've got this lovely lemon just hanging out of nowhere. It looks like it's magically suspended. So that will be now in the middle of my charm bracelet. Now, because I've already done one end of my bracelet, I've already sealed that up. I'm just going to make sure that that crimp is good and solid, and then I think I'm going to put one of my crimp covers on. Now, you guys are always working with crimps and crimp covers. This is not my comfort zone. I work with wire. I know how to make wire do things for me. So you will have your own technique for popping a crimp cover over the top of your crimp. Now, believe me, I have tried this a dozen different ways. This is the only way I can get it to work for me. So I pop the crimp cover over that crimp, and I never double crimp. I always single crimp. And then I'm just going to close up that crimp cover and hope that it doesn't go too badly awry. Not my skill set, unfortunately. So there we go. We've closed up that crimp cover. It's reasonably round. I'll live with that, I think. And then I'm going to start loading my beads on. So let's see how many of these I can knock over before we get to the end of loading these beads on. So whilst I'm doing the job of loading beads onto a piece of beading thread, which is not exactly thrill a minute, why don't you tell me what your jewellery making aspirations are for the coming year? We're only in February, so there's still plenty of time to have plans. Do you want to learn a new medium? Do you want to attend a show somewhere? What do you fancy doing? So I'm going to just continue working to add my beads on. So I've gone for small blue round, step cut faceted coin, small blue round. Then I've gone for a slice of lemon, followed by another small blue round. And when I call them a small blue round, it sounds like they're dull, and they are not. They are sparkly and vivacious. Then we've got another step cut coin with that gorgeous AB coating. I should stop calling this Madeira. It's really not Madeira at all. It's an opaque, warm yellow rondelle. And then we've got this gorgeous, it's a proper lemon. Proper lemon there. Then I've gone for another of the opaque rondelles. One of the beautiful blues, which makes me think of that island that I don't know the name of, but it looks amazing. And then I've gone for a massive faceted round, truly sunshine-oriented bead next. And then I imagine I meant to put one of these little daisy spacers either side. Now, when you're adding multiple charms to a strand, if they have a face, you'll need to make sure that the same face fits. So that's the wrong side, that's the right side. So let's just slide that on onto the desk and we can check to see. Yes, they're in the same orientation. Well, that's a win, isn't it? That's a definitive win. So let's slide these beads on as quickly as we possibly can. And you can tell me if you're planning on joining us at Beads and Blooms, coming very, very soon. Back end of April into the beginning of May. So many classes and techniques to learn. I'm very, very excited to be joining you again. So let's have a look where we are at in the grand scheme of things. I think I meant to go for the small blue. I want to get adventurous with wire work. Hazel, exciting! Well, I look forward to joining you on that journey if you'll let me. I am going to be teaching at Beads and Blooms, and I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say as yet. When I've got to the middle of my design, I'm going to add the charm bead creation that we just made together. Now that is on the wrong way round. If you look at my lemons, they're going outwards with the face up. This is coming inwards with the face up. So if I flip it over, that's going to be wrong. So it always pays to pop things down on a board and just check before you seal it off, because it's very boring to have to rethread it twice. What sort of things are you looking to do with wire work, Hazel? Tell me about your aspirations. And hopefully I'll be able to join you on some of those adventures. I did that in the wrong order, so let's whip that little blue one off and put one of those gold, and it's a sultry gold as well. Absolutely beautiful. What do you normally work with, Hazel? Are you a beader? Do you use clay, ribbon, macrame? What's your thing? What's your comfort zone? I'd also like to talk a little bit about self-care. Now, what is it that you do for yourself when you're feeling a little bit meh? Is there somewhere that you go? Is there something that you do? If I can't get my jewellery mojo working, I usually crack out a pair of earrings. Because I find earrings, they get me in a mindful state because I have to try and pair them. And if I can pair them, I know that actually I can do things. I'm not completely useless. And sometimes we all need a little bit of a reminder that actually we're way cooler than we give ourselves credit for. And we absolutely should be congratulating ourselves on the days when we achieve things when we don't feel like up to much. Hazel is a beader. What about you other guys? What sort of mediums or media rather do you work with? Have we got any polymer clay people here? I recently had a little dabble with some polymer clay. Hadn't touched it for at least a decade. And naturally enough, I got very, very filthy hands from playing with it. I don't really know what I'm doing, if I'm completely honest, but I had a lovely time. It's nice sometimes to go through a process of self-challenging in a way that, you know, you don't have to run 100 miles. You don't have to climb the biggest mountain. Sometimes just kind of, yeah, a stretchy bracelet, Gaetana says. Absolutely fantastic idea. Stretchy bracelets are wonderful because you can really go to town with your creativity whilst also being quite mindful about the things that you're achieving. So there's lots of fun to be had with simpler pieces of jewellery. Let's have a look at that, see if that sits okay. Now, I'm not actually going to undo this if I've put anything in the wrong order, but what I tend to do is I like to book match my bracelets. And obviously, if you are the type of jewellery maker who's happy to go for a jumble design, then I admire you hugely. It's wonderful to be able to have that more eclectic design. So I'm overall quite happy with how that's sitting. Thinking on it, I might take those daisy spaces off and put the small blues against the lemon charms. But for right now, I'm not going to fret about it. Maria is a lamp worker. I melt glass rods in a torch and make unique beads, many shapes. That is so exciting. What a talent. Absolutely fabulous. So let us grab in a couple more component parts. Just dumping them unceremoniously onto the table. So I need a crimp. Anne says, I now work with wire and beads. When I started out, I was doing peyote. Is that how we say it? Peyote? Beading with seed beads in the year 2000. So I have a love and hate affair with seed beads. I love the look of them. I am far too silly to be able to do it properly. I can just about make snowflakes at Christmas with tiny, tiny seed beads. And do you know what? It's all based on a pattern of a a plant pot holder that my nan had in the 1980s. And it's just a little snowflake shape with beads in different sizes. I'll get one up on social media at some point, I suppose. And you can all laugh at me. I'm very, very simple with seed beads. So when you're creating a beaded bracelet, you obviously already know this because you're very talented beaders, but you don't want to put too much tension into it. Too much tension is a risk to your beads. It also makes an ungainly bracelet. So we need to have a tiny bit of flexibility there, a tiny bit of spare space. And I also want to talk to you about rescuing a project. So let's crimp this off first of all. If you need to know what beading wire I'm using, just for demonstration purposes, because it's black and it shows up well on the table, I'm using Soft Flex beading wire in that black onyx colour. Just if you're interested, you can obviously use your favourite beading wire. Now, when I take whatever material I'm using, whether it be fireline or something like that, I always bend it back and away so that it lifts up from that squashed crimp. And once I've got that little bend and fold, I can get really close with my cutters to that crimp bead. On my demonstration piece, I crimped twice and crimp covered twice. I generally am a belt and braces kind of girl. I'd much rather have a couple of those to make sure that everything is good and safe. Now again, please don't judge my technique for putting crimp beads on. It's not my comfort zone. So I just slide that on over the flat crimp and then close that up gently. And I tend to do that in a couple of little bites of the cherry, just to close those little teeth over the end, just to make sure that everything is as round and smooth as possible. So I'm really quite happy with that. But do you know what makes a charm bracelet even more charming? Let's just close this up for a second into the second loop on my chain. Sometimes you might want to have just more. Sometimes less is more and sometimes more is more. So let's say that we wanted to add another charm to the other end. Anne says, yes, you pronounced it correctly. That's a win. Is peyote the one where it's kind of stripy, I want to say? It's a bit of a mystery to me. So I have another bead and I have another charm to work with. Let's get that bracelet holder off. Scooch the bracelet over and warm this through. Now, rather than having a swoosh of wire like we did on this one and that little spiral, we're going to go for a very clean design, and I'm going to show you how to attach that directly into the end of the chain. As few connections as possible makes for safer jewellery. So again, about 1.25 inches from the end, a bend in my 18 gauge wire, and again it's 3.5 to 4 inches. Do love your bead holder dish. Is there anywhere that I can get one from? Sue, whereabouts in the world are you? I have these in the UK, but I can't post them stateside because it's prohibitively expensive, the little angel dishes, unfortunately. The little flat ones, they tend to post okay because they're very skinny. So let's make another round form, again using the smaller side on my memory wire pliers. Draw that all the way around and over. And you can see that I've kind of made that like a spiral, left a gap in between here. And that just means it's ever so slightly easier to slide the charm on. Now, as I mentioned when we were creating together today, instead of the big enamel lemon charm, you could have used one of the teeny tiny ones, and they make a really beautiful little extender chain dropper. It's nice to have weight on the end of your extender chain, because when you're putting the bracelet on, especially if you're doing it yourself, it gives you an opportunity to hold on to something with the other hand whilst you line the hook up to fit in the chain. So I always add just a little something extra on the end. Sometimes it's a head pin with a teeny tiny bead, and that looks really, really elegant, especially if you do have a very shy and retiring, elegant necklace design. So again, supporting across that round form. This is exactly the same way that we started off earlier, and we're going to go for 2 rotations around that core wire. If your fingers struggle with this, you can employ a second set of pliers just to make that happen. And again, I'm putting my fingers close to, but not against my cutters, and it just stops the wire from jumping up. You don't have to worry about that unless you're filming yourself, in which case just be careful of your camera, because it's rubbish if the wire comes up and cracks the lens, as happened to me. So let's slide on a bead. Now for this, you don't have to have a very large bead, anything that fits on your wire of choice. And you can use 20 gauge. I'm working with 18 gauge again, as we did with the charm at the front of the bracelet. But you can work this design up because the strength comes from the rotations around that core. So we're just going to go for a very simple and clean line. I think I'll probably keep to the same design where those 2 loops are in the same orientation. So the loops on the wire are in opposition to the loop of the lemon, and that just means it sits down flat. Especially if you're looking to sell your jewellery, it's helpful to have things that sit flat on a display. So let's rotate that wire all the way around to create another round form at the end. And again, I've left that gap, made a little spiral, and we're going to add this directly into the last loop of your extender chain. Close that up by hand because we warmed that wire through. It's really easy to do so. And then we'll hold across that loop Again, not pressing on the chain, not pressing on the area where the wire crosses over. And we'll just rotate that around until we fill the gap. You do have the opportunity to add that swoosh and to add that spiral, but I said that I wanted to show you a cleaner lined alternative. So let's have a look at the orientation of the lemon. So this is the front of our little extender dropper. So if we flip that over, this is the rear of the design. That's where we're going to want to trim that wire with the flush side of our cutters, and then very, very carefully. Now normally I would put my thumbnail over the bead to protect it, but I just want to show you, just very, very carefully, a little bit closer than normal. Again, it will be slightly blurry, but just how to bring that wire down flat against the core that runs through the middle of the bead. So that now doesn't stick up and it shouldn't catch on anything. And we've made ourselves a second fun, fruity, citrus Mediterranean lemonade bracelet. And it really didn't take that long for us to create that. I made that completely with you. I didn't even pre-thread those beads. So let's have a look. It's still me, I'm still here. How are you? Thank you for hanging out with me today. Let's see, have a look. Sue, I'm in Northampton. It was the flatter dish with the moon phases on. Speak to me after the live and we'll sort that out, my darling. Amazon has the white dish. I do not know if they still have them now. The angel wing dish, I'm sure you can find local to you as well. I've got a handful of those left, but we'll talk about that after the live. So I hope that you have enjoyed the Mediterranean lemonade charm bracelet with me, including that little bead extender dropper. As I said, if you're wearing a long line necklace, it's so elegant, especially if you're going for an updo, to have hair up and then at the back, just behind where that clasps together, a little tiny dangle of chain is really beautiful to wear. Also on a bracelet, it can be quite handy to help you if you have to put your bracelet on yourself. We don't all have a little helper to get that onto our wrists for us, so there's always the benefit there. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed working with me today on La Dolce Vita. La Dolce Vita, the February Magical Mystery Bead Box from Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem. Thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I'll be back very, very soon. Do please check out the Beads and Blooms. Head over to the Jessie James Beads page and see if you would care to join us. I'll be teaching multiple classes. Lots and lots of love. Mwah! We'll see you very, very soon. Bye for now.